Yeah, Phil Storey from Glow. So I am hosting today's how-to webinar for the Northern Affinity, and we're going to be talking about website security, which might sound like a little bit of a dry topic, but it's a very, very important one and becoming more and more so. So hopefully, well, certainly the aim of today is that you'll come away with some really, really useful tips, actionable tips that you can apply to your website to just lock it down a bit more and keep out those pesky hackers, basically, because there's a hell of a lot of them and they'll be trying very hard all the time. So yeah, nice to have you all on the call. I'm looking forward to sharing this info with you.
Thank you, Phil. No, I think I've sorted out my feedback problems, which is great. Firstly, to mention to everyone, it is Phil's birthday today, so we have to be nice to him. So, Phil, yeah, I'll just let you go ahead and go ahead with your presentation. And any questions that anyone has, there's a Q&A box. Please do put it in there, and we'll. I'm sure Phil will answer them as we go through, or at the end, and see how things go.
Thanks, Mike. Right, so I'll share my screen first, then get up the little presentation that I've prepared. So hopefully you can all see a big glow in the middle of the screen now. So yeah, so kind of as I said a couple of minutes ago, really going to kind of take you through a little bit of a journey about website security generally, the importance of it. Going to kind of openly ask you if you're looking at this yourself at all with your websites. You can use the Q&A to ask questions at any point about anything that I say as well. And then, as I said, I'll kind of end it with I've got 8 tips that you can use that you really don't need a web developer as such for to implement. So the one thing I will say is that the tips are relevant, a lot of them relevant, specific to WordPress websites only, which you may or may not have heard of, but there's essentially lots and lots of tools these days that you can use to build your website, and WordPress is arguably the most popular one, which is why we do so much work with it, because there's lots and lots of businesses that use WordPress. And because of that, it means that it's very heavily targeted as a platform by hackers. If you think back to sort of, I don't know, mid-90s, early 90s, when Microsoft was just the be-all and end-all in the personal computer world, well, everybody was trying to hack Microsoft and write viruses for Microsoft, not Apple, because nobody really had an Apple product then. So everybody was going after Microsoft. So try and think of WordPress in a similar sort of way, because it's so dominant in the market that it's in. Everybody's writing, virus and hacks and things for WordPress platforms. So that's kind of like the annoying news. But the good news is there's lots of things you can do to keep your site secure despite that. So we're going to kick off with a case study. And who doesn't love a case study about a dodgy website? So I want you to all to kind of imagine for the next sort of 5 or 6 seconds, not for too long, but the dodgiest website that you can think of. No need to shout it out. Please don't put it in the chat either. We probably all know what you're thinking. But now imagine that anytime anybody tried to access your business's website, they couldn't get to your website. They were being redirected to this dodgy website that we've now all got in our minds. Not a great picture, is it? Very embarrassing, and can really do a bit of damage to your business reputation, the reputation of your business online generally. And this is a real life story. We've actually seen it more than once. Most recently, it was actually earlier in the year for us. They weren't a client of ours, I will add, but we did get asked to come in and sort out the situation, basically. So this was a family mediation company in North Yorkshire, and that's exactly what was happening. Anytime any of their customers or general public tried to access their website, they were being diverted straight off onto some very unsavory content on another website. So we had a look into it. We were hired to kind of find out what was going on, and it was quite simple for us to find out. Really, the basic answer was that they weren't keeping the security of their website up to date, and this had been a long time coming, for about 5 or 6 months. So hackers had gained access, and then they were just spreading all this nonsense code around the website, which ultimately led to a redirect to this not very nice other site. So genuine possibility, and yeah, not great for the business. Now, talk about hacking and people trying to gain access to your website. There's a kind of a common misconception, really, that surely they're only focused on the big boys, the big companies, the ones with multi-million-pound turnovers. Well, that's not the case, and in fact, it's a large percentage, as you'll see on the next screen, that is targeted at the smallest of businesses. And what we mean by 39 seconds is that on average, this is how often a hack on a website occurs. So if you think about that across a year, that's an extraordinary amount of hack attempts that are successful on websites around the world. So given that, as you can see here, 43% of those are aimed at small businesses, you need to definitely get out of that mind space, if you were in it, that this is only reserved for the big boys, are these hacks. That's just not the case. So maybe have a think for a second about what it would cost you in your business if something like that terrible story I explained a few seconds ago happened to you online, and you didn't have it very well supported and looked after by a reliable developer, or you weren't putting in place the security measures that I'm going to share with you later on. It doesn't paint a great picture. So you're not exempt as a small business owner from the hacking world. And you've got, different types of hackers, of course, yeah? So you've got the genuinely very serious cyber criminals that will extort you for thousands and thousands of pounds. Very dangerous. And then you've got the ones that aren't really criminals and they're just doing it for a laugh, basically. So if you think about what you kind of enjoy doing in your leisure time, maybe you like going for a walk in Yorkshire, or you like going for a pint at the pub or whatever. Well, these people like sort of sitting at home and trying to hack into your website, and they'll do it all the time for as long as they like doing it. And they'll hack your site. They don't care who you are. They don't care what they do to you. And then there's kind of like mission accomplished, and they'll move on and try and do another one, basically. So it's very, very regular all the time, and it's increasing off the back of COVID. This is one stat just from one client website that we look after, and this was in the month of August. Wasn't exactly 1,000, but it was around 1,000 hacks prevented. And they're a very small business. They've got about 5 pages on the website, but our app Glow kept out 1,000 hack attempts in 1 month. So if the last slide didn't paint the picture around, how serious it is for small business to get a grip of, then hopefully that one will as well. So it's going on all the time. I'm not going to talk too much about Glow today because this is obviously not a sales pitch, it's an educational piece, but my business is Glow. And all we do all day, every day is maintain websites. And obviously a large part of maintaining a piece of software like a website is the security element of it. So we have an app for it. All of our clients have their own accounts. We work with marketing agencies who also have their own accounts and put their clients through it. It's a big time saver for us to look after it for them. But if you just think for a minute around websites and think of them a little bit like a car, I can very much appreciate that the world that my business is in is very techy, and nobody likes being spoken to in a technical way if they don't understand what people are talking about. So I always try and use kind of analogies. So if you think about a car, think about the last car that you bought, or you've leased it or whatever, you've got it for, 4 or 5 years. Now, over the course of time of having that car, you're going to do things like MOT it, you'll service it, you'll put air in the tyres, you'll clean it, you'll fuel it, all sorts of things to keep it performing well. So your website is very similar, it's just technical, I guess, online. So think about your website in a similar way to you think about your car. You look after your car because every time you get in it, you want to make sure it works properly. Well, same with your website. Just because you've had it built doesn't mean that every day over the course of the next, 5 years that you've got that particular website, that it's going to run perfectly, it's going to run quickly, it's going to be secure, it's going to deliver inquiries. Not the case. You've got to look after it. So think of it a little bit like your car if you can. So hopefully this question was very easy to answer after the first sort of 5 or 10 minutes of this webinar today. Should you be taking care of your website? Well, ask yourself for a second, if maybe you do have a physical shop or office, like the Northern Affinity has a headquarters. Well, ask yourself the question, if you were leaving that place of work on an evening, would you leave the door wide open when you left? Answer, Obviously not. Would you leave the key in the front door? You might do it by mistake. I think we've probably all done that at some point, but you wouldn't like consciously leave the key in the front door of the shop or office, would you? Or would you leave all the most expensive products on view with the window open just a touch to say, pop on in, take it all, please? Well, no, obviously you wouldn't do those things. So why would you not look after your website as well? Of course, it's something you should be looking after. It's an extremely important part of your business. It's online and available to your customers 24/7, representing you, hopefully, in the best possible light and attracting people to your business to help you build up inquiries and leads and sales. And ultimately, get you to achieving that vision that you've got, your why of being in business. It's a very, very important part of it. But it's also very time consuming is looking after your website. So if you sort of think for a second about all these bits that are popping up on screen now, these all, and there's more than I can fit on the screen, but these are all part of maintaining your website, partly keeping it secure, but also just looking after it generally, testing things still work okay. Again, think about the MOT on your car, not just going to magically work all the time, particularly with a piece of technology in the changing world that digital is. So you look at that and think, okay, wow, okay, right, it's very important, but Jesus, there's a lot to do here. So if you ask yourself honestly, if I flip back to that last slide with everything on, how many of those things have you done on your website in the last month? There's experts within Northern Affinity that are focused on creating good content for you, like Girls Are So Contented, and marketing strategies like Laura at Chroma and others that will get people to your website. But you want to make sure that when they're sending all that fantastic traffic to your website, that it works well, it's secure, it's running quickly, it's up to date, the forms work, all that sort of stuff. So I think the slides, Mike, will probably be available after this for people, and I know there'll be a video somewhere. So if you ever want to refer back to this slide, it's a really helpful one for you to look at and think, right, have I done this month? Have I done that? Have I added this or whatever? And just honestly assess it, because you should be doing all those things very regularly with your site. So that's just to give you a bit of a kind of background about websites and hacks and security and sort of why we exist, and a few of the bits that you could be doing to kind of look after your site. I'm now going to spend the rest of the webinar going into a bit more detail specifically about the security element of looking after your WordPress site. And I've got 8 tips to share with you. If you want to jump in and ask questions, at any stage with the tips, please do, and I'll try and answer them at the same time. Mike, I can't see the questions coming through, so if you wanted to kind of jump in and ask them, then that's cool with me.
Of course.
So the first place to start is checking whether your website actually is running on WordPress or not. We are well aware with the research that we've done that although you may have had your website built by a developer, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are still working with that web developer for whatever reason. They might not have been very good at support, it's slow, really expensive, unreliable generally, you can't get hold of them anymore, whatever that situation might be for you. Head over to our website at the link there, getglow.io/for-businesses, and you can pop your website address into the box on that page, and it will tell you after a couple of seconds if it's running on WordPress. If it is, then the next 8 slides are going to be super relevant for you and really, really helpful. If it's not, there's still going to be some tips here that are relevant even for non-WordPress sites. So I tried to kind of give a mix of both to make it a fair spread. But if there's sort of 6 or 7 of you on the call this morning, you've each got your own kind of business website, chances are probably around half of you have got a WordPress site. All right, a third. It counts for 37% of the entire internet as WordPress. So yeah, let's revise those figures. If there's 6 or 7 of you, there's probably 3 of you maybe. So it's a large part of the whole internet that runs off WordPress. So as I said right at the start of the call, that is the reason it's so heavily attacked, if you will, by hackers. But it's also a fantastic piece of kit for building very, very large websites, websites of any size really, small to large, e-commerce where you can buy things, blogs, you name it, you can do it with a WordPress website. Basically, it's extremely flexible. And when I was talking before about, the possible reasons that you may no longer work with your web developer that built the site, If they built it in WordPress, that's one of the best things they could have done for you, because that means it's very portable. So if you were going to move to another web developer or web development company to look after it for you, you can pick up and move a WordPress website very, very easily. If they built you a completely bespoke one that's, you know, unique to them, it's much harder for you to move it over and move it away from them. So
I'll just answer a question that we've had, if that's okay.
Sure.
Just, you know, about kind of generally using WordPress and also hacks. We've been asked by David, is there any specific industries or business sectors that maybe get more hacks or attempted hacks than others? Is there anybody that hackers look for, any types of businesses?
In relation to WordPress specifically, there isn't anything kind of, no, there's no kind of like top of the list sector, if you will, that hackers will target. The main thing that basically they're looking for, they don't care what sector you're in, they're just looking for the vulnerabilities in your website setup. And by vulnerabilities, well, you'll see that actually over the course of the next few slides. They know, because they do it day in, day out, they know what to look for in your website that tells them this is one to go after. And they're becoming more and more sophisticated. So, you know, we do occasionally see them occur even on some very, very well protected, very secure sites. They can still creep in. But if you do follow the steps that I'm going to outline here, you're giving yourself a far, far better chance of keeping them out, which is the important thing. But as you hopefully know, I guess, with technology, it's moving and changing all the time. So they'll always come up with more, you know, sophisticated and complex ways of trying to get into websites. So that's why companies like us exist, to keep up to date with the changing nature of the industry, to keep them out. So no, to answer the question, no sector specific. They know what they're looking for in the site to get in. So thanks for that question, David. So the first one is one of the easiest things that you can do actually with your WordPress site, and as it says on the screen, that's to change the default login address to the website. So if you've got a WordPress site, the chances are you have logged in, you've added a blog, or you've changed some content on one of the pages perhaps. Well, to do that, obviously you've got to log into the site first. So what we mean by change the default login is, if you take a look at this screenshot here, I've picked a company as far away from Yorkshire as possible. So these are down in Cornwall. So hopefully I'm not embarrassing anybody. But if you have a look at the web address bar up at the top there that I've highlighted, it's awaccountants.co.uk/WP-admin. So with every single WordPress website that is created, the default login is always /WP-admin. So guess who knows that? Hackers. Every single one will know that the first place to start is check if the login is still WP-admin, because that gets them the login screen immediately. So one of the best things that you can do is change that as soon as possible to something that isn't WP-admin. Something unique, I don't know, your kids' names, your favourite football team, your favourite place to travel around the world, whatever it is, make it not WP-admin. And that's one little step just to keep them away from your login screen, basically. As soon as they're at your login screen, that's when they can start trying to guess passwords and all that sort of stuff. It's called a brute force attack, and they'll just hammer that login page with password attempts. But if they don't know what it is, you're making it a lot harder for them to get to that step. So tip number one, change that login screen. There's a few ways of doing that. You can add a plugin to your WordPress site, which is kind of like an extension. There's lots of those types of things with WordPress sites. You just do a quick search for like security plugin or something like that. There'll be one that pops up that allows you to change that login address to help keep them out. So I've just mentioned plugins. So the second tip is to make sure that these are always up to date. So the plugins for WordPress, there's numerous hundreds of thousands of them that basically allow you to extend the functionality of your website. So a good example would be a security one that I've just mentioned. You can get them that help you with improving the SEO quality of your website to make it rank higher on Google. There's things to help you with social media. There's things for forms, so people can inquire through a form on your website. There's all sorts. There's lots of excellent ones, and there's lots of terrible ones. but what they all have in common almost is that they release updates for them. And they do that because usually it's a security reason. They've found a bug in their software, so they're telling you that it needs updating because they've resolved it. So then you have to update it. The longer you leave those updates, the more vulnerable your website becomes, because again, guess who knows when those plugins are out of date? Hackers. So they will then start to exploit your website based on that knowledge that that plugin's out of date, and they'll know how to write some code to get in. As soon as they're in, they can do whatever they want pretty much. So make sure they are always kept up to date as quickly as you can possibly do them. So here's an example of what that would probably look like on your WordPress website. This is a plugin called Responsive Menu, as you can see there, and then there's a little tick box next to that. You just tick the tick box and click the Update Plugins button, and that updates it for you. What you then want to make sure you do afterwards is check that it still works as it should. So clearly this is a menu plugin. What it means is that it gives you that nice little menu on your mobile for your website, basically. So after you've updated it, open the website on your mobile, in this case, and check that the menu still works nicely. If it does, happy days. Okay, moving on to tip number 3. So I mentioned in the first tip that the default login for a WordPress website is always /WP admin. Well, just as with that, the default user account that is created with a WordPress setup is always admin. Again, who knows that? Hackers. They all know that the default username is admin. So as soon as they gain access to your login page, bang, first username they'll try is admin, and then they'll try guessing those passwords repeatedly until they get in or they get stopped from getting in. So change admin to something else. You can't actually physically rewrite the word admin. You have to add a new user onto your site and give that a username of maybe your name or your company and your name, whatever it is, as long as it isn't admin. And then log in as that new user you've created and delete the admin account. And that's another nice little security step secured for your website. There you go. Here's a list of users on a website that we look after. It's actually my brother's estate agent website. So you can see in that list of usernames there isn't one that's called admin. So we've got it set up there. So it's got the client's company name, hyphen, and then the first name of the person at that company. So that's a nice, easy one to follow. As long as it's not admin though, generally, you're fine. We've all had this drummed into us for, well, decades now, haven't we, about passwords? And we've all got hundreds of them because we keep signing up to stuff. Netflix, Amazon, your website, Facebook, whatever it is, we've all got lots and lots of passwords. And it just amazes us that we still see passwords today that are genuinely like the ones that you can see in the list there. They are remarkably easy for hackers to guess. And like I said before, as soon as they're in, the damage is done because they could just do pretty much whatever they like at that point. So please, please use a strong password. WordPress is brilliant for sort of telling you how strong the password is as you're typing it in. You've probably seen that on other websites these days as well. So as you type the password, it sort of has like a strengthometer kind of thing, and it'll tell you if it's weak and it'll tell you if it's strong and everything in between. So basically, don't use anything that's in the name of your business, that's in the name of your web address. Don't use your name. Never use password 123. Use special characters, so use exclamation marks, question marks, commas. You can use spaces. You can use the space bar in your password. Get a little bit creative, and then you can save it on your web browser as well, so you don't have to remember it. Or there's tools like LastPass, 1Password that you can sign up to, and it stores all your passwords in a very, very secure manner. But please don't use any of the ones that are in that list there. So about halfway through here, you see, and by this point, you're already starting to build up quite a nice little security wall from those hackers on your WordPress site. So you've changed the default login, you've changed the default username, you've set a really, really strong password, and you're making sure the plugins are kept up to date all the time. So this is already far more than the vast majority of WordPress website owners will ever do with their sites. The next one is to run a daily scan of the website. Now you can do this with a plugin. That'd be the easiest thing to do. Set up a plugin. There's an excellent one that we use called WordFence. It's free, so you can go to your plugins section of your website to add the WordFence plugin, and set up the scan option, and it'll just run it every day. You don't have to go in and run it yourself. It'll do it every day. Obviously, you should be going in to check, and it can send you emails if you set it up correctly as well to let you know if there's anything serious that you need to look at. But it essentially just daily, on a daily basis, it runs a scan of your entire WordPress website. So websites, effectively, they're made up of lots and lots of folders and files. So think about where you have your, your cloud storage, if you use something like Dropbox or Google Drive. When you look at that, it's folders and files, basically, isn't it? Well, a website is no different, folders and files. So WordFence will scan through every single folder, file, and your entire database. And if there's anything serious that needs addressing, it'll tell you, and then you can sort it out. And it talks you through how to do it. It's very, very good. And like I said, it's free. So I would strongly recommend getting something like this set up, because if you don't, and hackers do somehow manage to gain access, they'll drop like what we call malicious files onto your website setup, files that shouldn't be there, basically, that they've added to do a particular function, which could be redirecting it to that dodgy website I mentioned at the start, for example, whereas a scan would pick that up. So if that did happen, you'd know from the scan and you could delete the file straight away, dead easy. So strongly recommend getting something like WordFence set up. Sixth one is to never install a plugin that is unsupported with your version of WordPress. There's a few things to take into account, to be honest with you, when you're adding a plugin. The majority of which you can actually see on this screen here. So if you've ever added a plugin to your website, you'll get like a grid of options for plugins that you can add. And I've taken this as an example here. This plugin is called Redirection. But if you can see in the bottom right corner of that little box that I've highlighted, it says untested with your version of WordPress. So WordPress is constantly releasing new versions, usually for security measures, and often also to make their system better and more user-friendly for people to build websites. But sometimes WordPress can get ahead of the plugin. So in this particular example, that the version of WordPress that the website was running was higher than the version that this plugin could cope with. So that's why it says it's untested with this version of WordPress. So be very wary about adding a plugin that's untested with this version of WordPress, because it can cause a lot of problems for you if you do install it. I will spend a little bit of time, actually, now that I'm here, just on the other elements to adding a plugin to your site. I've created a little video for it for Glow, actually, which will be going out onto social media soon. But there's a couple of other things just to take note of there when you're adding a plugin that are relevant from the security perspective. So you've got one that says untested with your version of WordPress. That's not great. I do feel like it would be helpful for you to know what is good, although you can't see it on this screen. It'll say compatible with your version of WordPress, and it'll have a little green tick next to it. So if you see that, that's a good start. The other things to take note of are the line above that. You can see it says last updated. So this particular plugin was last updated 4 months ago. It might not sound like that long in the grand scheme of things, but it's actually quite a while for a reliable plugin. So the best ones, you very rarely see that last updated line any older than about a week. So they're constantly improving it from a security perspective. So I'd be looking at that thinking, okay, it's untested with this version of WordPress. It's not been updated for 4 months. Probably not going to install this particular plugin. And then on the left-hand side, your confidence is regained a little bit because it's got lots of reviews, 4 stars out of 5. So that's very good. So think of looking for plugins a bit like shopping on Amazon. You wouldn't buy a 1-star product on Amazon because it would be rubbish, probably. You would potentially buy a 4.5 star if everything else seemed good and the price was right and that sort of stuff. Well, with this plugin, it's kind of, maybe redeemed itself on the left-hand side there by the fact it's got 4.5 stars out of 5, got hundreds of reviews, and it's also got over 1 million active installations, which is a lot for a plugin. So it's very well used and it's very highly rated. It just hasn't been updated for a while. So that one's a bit of a coin toss. If on that left-hand side the reviews weren't very good and it had like 1,000 installations, I would be giving that a seriously wide berth. So there's just a few things to bear in mind there about plugins, but generally speaking, if it's unsupported, I'd be pretty wary of it. Just like passwords, backing things up is another thing we've had drilled into us now for decades, since we all started getting PCs. So if you're saving your work, basically, isn't it? I remember that when I was writing my dissertation at uni, I was fretting like mad thinking about the different places that I'd saved it, because obviously if you lost that, it's an absolute nightmare. So think about your website in a similar way. Is it backed up to multiple locations? So the fact that you have a website live on the internet means that it's hosted somewhere. You've probably heard of website hosting. So whoever that company is, they will be keeping backups of your websites. That's one place, that's good. But then always get another solution, at least one other backup solution. And you can do that through WordPress as well. So again, you can add a reliable backup plugin, or you can use something like Glow. So we back everything up as well for our clients on a very regular basis. But just bear in mind that it's very important to make sure that it is. Because obviously if it isn't and something goes wrong and you haven't got a backup to call on, it's a bit of a messy situation, that. And that kind of wraps up that story that I started at the beginning of the webinar. They didn't have a backup. They had to build their entire website again after we'd found out what was causing that redirect to that dodgy website. So always make sure you've got more than one backup. And then finally, of course, by the way, that is relevant to any website. It doesn't have to be WordPress. Make sure it's backed up. Same with the password, and same with this last one here, which is the security certificate. So you've probably heard of this, I would have thought, nowadays, because it gets talked about a lot more than it used to. And this is what you would see. It's a graphical representation, obviously, of what you would see if you didn't have a security certificate enabled on your website. So if you go back in time a little bit, security certificates really were only reserved for e-commerce websites, so where people were paying for things on the website. So obviously bank card information is very sensitive information. So keeping it secure means that card information wasn't accessible to people that would do naughty things with it. But that changed a couple of years ago. So Google, basically whatever Google says you've got to adhere to really these days online with your website. So they said that they are now going to call out websites that aren't secure. So it does actually say now, if you're on Google Chrome and you go to a website that isn't secure, it tells you that it's not secure, which of course is a terrible thing for your business to be showing, isn't it? It's again a bit like having that storefront or that office, physical location, and leaving a little sign on the door that says the door's unlocked, crack on, basically. So don't do that. You obviously wouldn't do that, so don't do it with your website. Get a security certificate installed. You can get free ones, they're okay, and then you can get some that a bit more robust that you pay for. It can be like 50 quid a year, 100 quid a year, is nothing. Just get it sorted out. And that secures all of the data that gets entered into your website. So if somebody makes an inquiry and they leave their postal address or the phone number or the email address or the bank card, whatever it is, that information then gets encrypted by the security certificate, which means nobody can access it or see it, basically. So definitely go and check if your website is secure today. And if not, ask your web developer to sort it out. So I'd like to say thank you very much for listening. Hopefully that was not too techy, and that you can have taken some helpful bits away there for your website to implement as soon as possible. Particularly if you've not got any of them sorted out, you definitely want to get cracking. But if you've got a few, brilliant, and hopefully there's a couple more there for you as well. So thanks very much for listening to me. If you've got any questions, I'd love to stick around for a few more minutes and answer them.
Thank you, Phil. That's really useful and really, really good information. So like I said, if anyone's got any questions, either put it in the Q&A box or feel free to put your hands up as well. And we could even bring you on the video, but that's entirely up to you. But we do have a couple of questions to crack on with for now, Phil, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
I'll go for one that I was asked straight away. Well, quite early on, actually, was from Sarah. So if you're putting out content, blogs and lots of activity on social media, are you more likely to be a target of hackers, or is that not really relevant?
No, it's not really relevant. No, I think I probably answered that in in a similar way. Answered that question from David earlier. Really, they're not looking at your social media presence. They're looking specifically at your WordPress website and the way that is set up. And if it's weak in areas, they'll just hammer those areas basically to get into your site. So the stuff I've shared today, and there is more, of course, is just kind of patching up those holes basically and making sure that that defense is nice and secure to keep them out. So no, don't be worried about continuing to put more content out on social. Definitely keep doing that. But it's not going to make you more of a target to hackers. I mean, I guess unless you got to the size of like Sony or TalkTalk or someone like that, then clearly you're extremely well known and will be targeted by more hackers. But my guess is that the people on the call today will be small to medium-sized businesses. If that's the case, they're just looking directly at your site. So it's about keeping them out.
Thank you, Phil. Now we've had another question from Anna Short, who's asked, what would be a good plugin for the backup?
There's quite a few. Well, obviously you can use Glow. we back everything up for our clients. So if you had a Glow account, then we take care of all that for you. There's a couple of other fantastic ones. There's one called Back WP Up, which is a little bit of a mouthful, I always think, but it's Back WP Up, and it's quite a lightweight plugin. And what I mean by lightweight is one of the other problems with plugins sometimes is that they can add a lot of bloat to your site. And you've probably heard these days about the importance of page speed. So your pages are loading really quickly. It's obviously very frustrating online, isn't it, when we access websites and it takes ages for the pages to load. Well, the more kind of bloaty sort of plugins that you've got on there, the slower your site's going to be. So Back WP Up is a good one because it is quite lightweight and doesn't add too much to your site. Does a cracking job of running regular backups for you. And then there's another good one called Updraft, all one word, Updraft. They're both free, but again, like with lots of plugins, they always have kind of like premium versions that you can pay for. However, that's often not required. So you can do quite a lot with the free versions of these things. So that'd be the two I'd recommend: Back WP Up and Updraft.
Thank you, Phil. Hopefully I answered your question, Anna. A question for me, actually, Phil, was when you talked about passwords and things earlier. So I think one of the reasons probably most people have relatively simple passwords is to remember them all. As you touched on earlier, we've all got millions of different things now. And you mentioned things like LastPass. And I remember using them personally myself a number of years ago. Can you maybe just explain exactly how services like LastPass work and the benefits of that?
Yeah, so they're kind of like think of them a bit like a bank vault. So you've got that big vault door on the bank, and in there are all your passwords, and no one's getting in, basically. So the idea of them is that you only ever have to remember one password ever again, which is your password for LastPass, or one password. There's a few others. And it basically kind of links up every time that you sign up for a new service, or you're logging in somewhere for the first time, whatever it is, on a website. LastPass or one password will say, do you want us to remember this one? You tick yes, and that goes into your kind of secure bank vault. And then every time you come back to that site, you don't have to remember what the password is, because you click a little button, LastPass will populate that login form because it knows what it is, and then you're logged in, basically. So they're pretty much about as secure as it can get these days for storing all your passwords. I mean, who was I talking to the other day? It was a client, actually, a new client of ours, and we were just sort of introducing them to the website and the logins and stuff. And the woman we were speaking to had a book, pages of passwords written down. And I always remember my dad doing that as well, and he had it stuck up on the wall in the office in the house. Password for HSBC, password for this. I was like, no, don't do that. What if somebody gets in? So definitely don't write them down in a little book anywhere. Get something, get your own little system for using passwords, or use something like LastPass or one password.
Yeah, so I guess the benefit of those is you can have quite complex passwords, like the recommended ones with exclamation marks and pound signs and all that kind of stuff on each individual one. And then, but as long as you know your LastPass one, or whatever system you use,
there's a little tool on there's another little tool you can use on WordPress that'll tell you on average how long it would take a hacker to guess your password. So if you type your password in, it'll tell you how long it'll take them to guess, basically. If you put password 123 in, it'll take about a second for them to guess it, probably less. But if you had a really complex one, the ones that you were just talking about there, Mike, it will come up with something like 480 billion years or something like that for them to guess. It's just almost impossible, basically. So I would strongly recommend using one of those services to just lock down all your passwords, and then you don't have to think about it again, then do you? Us business owners like having less things on our plate, don't we? So that's one thing to just, take care of all that stuff, basically.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Phil. I think that's it. Unless anyone's got any more questions. Apologies for the little technical hitch at the start within the feedback. Thankfully, being able to hear Phil okay, which is the main thing, not myself. So as everyone on the call hopefully knows, we're doing this on a weekly basis with various different subject matters. And I know Phil's going to do another one a bit later on in the year as well, which is going to be good. So thank you, everyone, for coming on. I'm sure if anyone has any more questions that pop in your head over the next few hours or days, Phil will be able to field them. And thank you. And thank you again, Phil, and have a good rest of your birthday. Yes,
thanks very much, Mike. Yeah, off out this afternoon. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.